had an opportunity to have a consult call with a client yesterday, and she was telling me she had a podcast. She was rebranding it. She was tired of doing things on her own, just a lot like we just shared before. And that she didn't think, hadn't planned to be able to monetize it. She was going to relaunch it in October. And she said, by 2026, I should be able to monetize it. And I was like, oh, no. Hold on just a second. I was like, you don't have to wait another 2 years to monetize your show. And I think it's like the mindset around that growth trajectory and having to wait is probably one of the things that I really, if anyone takes, if you're listening to the show right now, what I want you to take away from it is really you can start to monetize your show with brands and partnerships and advertising at any size audience or even pre-launch. There's just certain strategies and formulas of ways to do that.
Yeah, I love that because it feels really daunting. And I think sponsorship too, even just the idea of approaching other companies and brands to ask for the sponsorship, it's so easy to feel that imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? What are they going to want from me? So how do you know when you're ready?
Yeah. So what you're really actually talking about too, I think, is that anybody who has never done anything always has some trepidation, some fear, some overwhelm. And most podcast hosts, like, for example, if you're a financial advisor and you're hosting a podcast to be a subject matter expert in thought leadership around financing, real estate planning, estate planning, talking the language of a brand, talking to a marketing director at a brand or talking to somebody, like, that's out of your typical wheelhouse. So that's going to feel uncomfortable. So I think the first thing you have to do is kind of set yourself up to know this is going to maybe feel a little awkward for me.
Yeah.
So I recommend in those cases that you start having conversations with people that already know of you, know the quality of your work, the brands that are already listening to your shows, and really think through those conversations that you starting with your warm network first. And that's where we've seen a lot of success. So, for example, this is not limited to just people who have broad regional, national, international audiences either. This is a scenario for like a divorce attorney, for example. We have had success with PR agencies whose main audience is in the Connecticut Northeast area. That's where their client bases are. Interior designers who get the majority of their businesses with local brick and mortar, local clients in the Atlanta, Georgia market. So you have to just start thinking about who is in your backyard, who is in the footprint of your audience, or who are vendors that you already work with. Like, a great example of that would be the interior designers, for example. They have been possibly in business for years. If you are a service-based business, for example, think of how long you've been in business and how many vendors you've worked with over the years, right? So you buy from Kohler, you utilize different wallpaper companies, different fabric companies. You've been providing them business for a really long time. They know that you are going to deliver a quality product to the audience, and that audience is likely going to want to purchase that product, right? So that's the mentality that you have to start. And I really believe that the power of those conversations and the confidence that comes from them is just starting with the relationships that already exist for you, because they're easier conversations to have.
Yeah. And it's just like podcasting. When you first do your own show or you guest on a podcast for the first time, like, it feels awkward. You're worried, you're scared. It's like it gets better.
Yes, it does. And it also becomes it's like a muscle, or it's like when you very first start a workout, like, it's not going to be easy, and accepting that, and that it might feel awkward, or you may not get the first call, right? Like, don't let that stop you from making that first call. I think one of the biggest tips and things that I can share is that, you really want to start where you are. And if where you are is a smaller audience, then start looking at the other things that you can build in for the value of someone who might be aligned with your audience or a brand that might want to get in touch with your audience. So look at, do you also upload your podcast to your website? And so can you include them in your show notes? Can
Mm,
you include them in additional social media that you have? What is your social media following? What is your, are you sending out a newsletter? And by the way, podcasters, if you're not sending out a newsletter, if you start with one subscriber, start that today. However, like those are the things you want to think about. Where can I bring value to these businesses? And even locally, I had an opportunity to talk to a podcaster whose audience are high net worth individuals. So they have a small but very engaged, passionate audience. And when I say small, I am talking typically of 1,000, 1,500 downloads or less, because I get asked that a lot. Like, how
yeah.
do you define a small audience? In some cases, 350 or less. But because that audience, the quality of that audience has very high net worth, then they're able to tap
Mm,
into car dealerships. They're able
yeah.
to tap into luxury brands. And it doesn't take a lot of conversions for the people who align with the shows to see results.
Level up your podcast with advice from the pros at Produce Your Podcast. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your network. For more expert tips and services, visit produceyourpodcast.com.